So one way to think about economic inequality and just income in general is to think about how a person earns their income, right? And we can think about that in terms of what are often referred to as endowments. And so endowments are going to be all the facts about a person that affect his or her income. So that could be a person's human capital, so their education, their skills, their intelligence, but also, their personality, how hard they work, etc. It could be their wealth, right? So how much wealth do they have? Can they start a business, or do they have to work for somebody else? It could be their physical assets, right? It's strength. Do they have a lot of strength? Do they have height? Do they have quickness, etc. And then the value of each of those endowments. And so one of the things that's important to remember is that those values can change over time. And so while something like physical strength used to be very important in terms of a person earning their living, it's much less so now. And so technology and institutions affect the value of those endowments, right? And then that leads to economic inequality depending on those different endowments. And one thing that we should keep in mind is that that economic inequality then can both change as the value of the endowments changes, but it can also change as one thing is valued and then another thing is valued differently over time. And it can also change based on the institutions in an economy and the policies in future periods. So one concern these days is that economic power, economic inequality is being translated to political power and political inequality, so that they are able to change the rules in order to benefit them. So for instance, eliminating the estate tax, or reducing income on capital gains, etc. Income taxes on capital gains. And so, but it could work the other way, right? It could be that, unions get extra power, minimum wages are passed, etc. And so that can change economic inequality as well. It also is going to influence where people end up in these principal agent relationships, so that if you start with wealth, then you're more likely to be a lender uh, than a borrower. And if you're a borrower, do you have enough to borrow that you can become an employer, or start your own business? um, and so differences in endowments can really influence where you end up on that economic ladder. And if those economic endowments are passed on through the generations, then that can influence where your children and your grandchildren end up as well. So let's just walk through a few examples. So, as we've said before, the main rise in economic growth has been an increase in worker productivity. So each hour of work being able to produce more. So, for example, it may be that the workforce increases its human capital through increasing education. So as education increases, workers become more productive, firms make higher profits. That means more firms enter, unemployment goes down. Workers now have a better reservation option because of the additional firms that are hiring, and so they can earn higher wages and inequality can fall. If we look at this through our labor market diagram and then look at the Lorenz curve, we said that an increase in productivity, assuming that the wage setting curve stays the same, implies a movement from X to Y, so the real wage is going up and the unemployment rate is going down. And if we think of this in terms of the Lorenz curve, the decrease in unemployment means that more people are earning income, more people are earning that wage. And even if the markup doesn't change, so remember the markup determines what percentage of the income is received by employers, so that stays the same. We still get a slight decrease in the Gini coefficient because more people are working. And even if the Gini coefficient stays the same, we could still argue that people are better off because they are earning a higher real wage. A second example is labor market segmentation. So this could be segmentation due to different groups. It could be different racial groups or ethnic groups or gender groups that are treated differently in the labor market. It could be that some people have full-time employment and receive benefits, and other people only receive part-time employment and so don't receive benefits. So, for example, the so-called gig economy of people driving for Uber or Lyft or doing TaskRabbit, things like that, um, with short-term contracts and limited job security, that could mean that we have more inequality. And if we're able to eliminate that segmentation and get everybody into the primary labor market, that could reduce inequality, right? So in this Lorenz curve, we see that the people here are in the secondary job market earning less income. The primary job market here, they're earning more income, and then here are our owners. If we can get rid of that segmentation, either by reducing discrimination, so that we reduce racial or gender discrimination, or we say, hey, everybody has to be treated as a full-time employee, uh, then we get everybody into the primary job market. And even if the owners are still getting their 40% here, the Lorenz curve shifts in and the Gini coefficient falls and we reduce inequality, even if the unemployment rate stays the same. The other thing that we talked about a lot before is this idea of automation, right? And so automation has been the story of long-run economic growth when workers are replaced by machines, which allows the other workers to uh, produce more per hour worked. But the problem, of course, is that in the short run, that can increase unemployment. And so, what happens in the short run is that we get a reduced demand for the lower skilled wages, higher demand for the higher skilled wages. The owners are still earning their same share based on the markup. And so we get this in the short run, we get an increase in inequality. And so that's certainly one argument for why inequality has increased in the United States over the last 40 years, although it's not, I think, the only story. In the long run, with automation, we have two opposing effects, right? So higher unemployment reduces workers' reservation options, which lowers their wages, but the increase in productivity increases profits, and so that should create new jobs and increase the wage. And so the question is, well, if in the long run wages go up and the unemployment rate may even go down, as we talked about before, how can we get from the short run to the long run? How can we provide opportunities for those displaced workers, the workers who are replaced by machines, to upgrade their skills and become the skilled workers? And how can we, make sure that we match them with job opportunities and higher wages in those non-routinized sectors? So this is definitely one of the questions that we sort of have to ask continuously in a capitalist society, but also especially in times of change, whether that change is due to automation or an increase in trade or some other big shock that has affected a lot of work.